The Tesla free energy generator. Nikola Tesla's vision for wireless power transmission began as an extension of his groundbreaking work with alternating currents. But by 1899, as he established his experimental station in Colorado Springs, Tesla was pursuing something far more ambitious than simply improving existing electrical systems. He was attempting to tap into what he called radiant energy, a form of electromagnetic radiation that he believed permeated all space and could be converted into usable electricity. Tesla's approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. Rather than generating power through conventional means like burning coal or harnessing water flow, his system would extract energy directly from the natural electrical field that surrounds our planet. The Earth itself would become a giant dynamo, capable of supplying unlimited power to any properly tuned receiver anywhere on the globe. The centerpiece of Tesla's wireless power system was his Wardenclyffe Tower, constructed on Long Island with funding from the powerful financier J.P. Morgan. This wasn't just an ambitious experiment. Tesla had already proven the concept worked. His demonstrations in Colorado Springs had successfully transmitted electrical power through the air across considerable distances, powering lights and motors without any physical connection to a power source. Witnesses to these early experiments described scenes that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Light bulbs glowed brightly while held in bare hands with no wires connecting them to any electrical source. Electric motors ran continuously, drawing their power seemingly from the air itself. Heating systems operated indefinitely without fuel, electricity, or any visible energy source. The implications of Tesla's free energy system were staggering. If fully developed, this technology could have eliminated humanity's dependence on fossil fuels over a century ago. There would be no need for power plants, electrical grids, or monthly utility bills. Energy would be as freely available as the air we breathe, accessible to anyone with the proper receiving equipment. But Tesla's revolutionary system posed a fundamental threat to the emerging electrical power industry. J.P. Morgan, who had invested heavily in conventional power generation and distribution systems, quickly realized that free energy would destroy the entire business model that was making him wealthy. According to historical accounts, Morgan confronted Tesla with a simple but devastating question that would seal the fate of wireless power transmission. If anyone can draw on the power, Morgan reportedly demanded, where do we put the meter? That single question revealed the true obstacle facing Tesla's free energy system. It wasn't a matter of scientific feasibility or technical challenges. The technology worked. The problem was economic. How could anyone profit from energy that was freely available to everyone? How could utility companies justify their existence if power could be extracted from the natural environment without cost? Within 2 years of this confrontation, Morgan withdrew his funding from the Wardenclyffe project. Without financial support, Tesla was forced to abandon his research. The tower was demolished, and all evidence of the successful wireless power demonstrations was systematically destroyed. The suppression of Tesla's free energy system didn't end with the destruction of Wardenclyffe Tower. When Tesla died in 1943, federal agents immediately seized all of his research materials. Over 80 trunks of documents were confiscated by the FBI, including detailed blueprints for scaling up the wireless power system to global proportions. These materials were classified under national security orders that remain in effect today. Independent researchers who have attempted to replicate Tesla's free energy system have faced systematic persecution. In 1957, engineer Lester Hendershot successfully built a working reproduction of Tesla's radiant energy collector. When he demonstrated the device to military officials, their response was swift and decisive. Within weeks, federal agents raided Hendershot's laboratory, confiscated his equipment, and warned him never to discuss his work again. This pattern of suppression continues today. Patent applications for free energy devices are immediately classified under the Inventions Secrecy Act, preventing inventors from developing or discussing their technologies publicly. Over 5,000 patents currently remain under secrecy orders, many involving energy generation systems that could eliminate dependence on conventional power sources. Tesla's free energy system represented more than just a technological breakthrough. It was a threat to the fundamental economic structure of modern civilization. Unlimited free power would have eliminated energy scarcity, reduced industrial costs to nearly zero, and fundamentally altered the balance of global economic power. The technology that could have freed humanity from energy dependence was deliberately erased to protect the interests of industries built on artificial scarcity. Tesla's vision of abundant free energy for all humanity was sacrificed to preserve the profit margins of companies that controlled the world's power supply. The Rife cancer cure machine. In the 1930s, Dr. Royal Raymond Rife invented a microscope so powerful it could observe living viruses and bacteria in real time. Using this unprecedented optical capability, Rife made a startling discovery. He found that specific electromagnetic frequencies could destroy cancer cells without harming healthy tissue. Rife's universal microscope achieved magnifications of over 60,000 times, using a revolutionary optical system that made living microorganisms visible without killing them. This was decades before electron microscopes were developed, yet Rife's optical system could resolve details that modern equipment struggles to match. Using this advanced microscope, Rife identified what he claimed was the specific electromagnetic signature of cancer-causing viruses. He then developed frequency generators that could destroy these pathogens selectively, targeting only the malignant cells while leaving healthy tissue completely unaffected. The principle behind Rife's frequency therapy was elegantly simple. Just as an opera singer can shatter a wine glass by hitting the exact resonant frequency of the crystal, Rife's machine could destroy cancer cells by bombarding them with their precise vibrational frequency. The cancer cells would literally vibrate to destruction, while healthy cells, having different resonant frequencies, remained unharmed. Clinical trials conducted in 1934 at the University of Southern California showed results that would be considered miraculous by today's standards. 16 terminal cancer patients were treated with Rife frequency therapy. Within 70 days, 14 were completely cured. The remaining 2 patients recovered fully after their treatment protocols were adjusted, achieving a 100% cure rate for terminal cancer cases. Dr. Milbank Johnson, who directed these clinical trials, prepared to announce this revolutionary cancer cure to the medical world. The implications were staggering. Cancer, one of humanity's most feared diseases, had been conquered using simple electromagnetic frequencies. But before the results could be published, Dr. Johnson died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. All documentation of the cancer cure trials vanished from university records, as if the research had never occurred. The American Medical Association, led by Morris Fishbein, immediately launched a campaign to discredit Rife's work. Medical journals refused to publish papers on frequency therapy. Researchers who supported Rife's discoveries lost their funding. Doctors who used Rife machines were threatened with the loss of their medical licenses. In 1939, agents working for pharmaceutical interests broke into Rife's laboratory and destroyed his research materials, including irreplaceable components of his universal microscope. The remaining Rife machines were systematically tracked down and destroyed, and the technicians who had built the devices were intimidated into silence. The suppression was motivated by more than just scientific skepticism. Cancer treatment had become a billion-dollar industry by the 1940s, generating enormous profits for pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and medical equipment manufacturers. Rife's simple, inexpensive cure threatened to eliminate the entire cancer treatment industry overnight. Several researchers who attempted to replicate Rife's work died under suspicious circumstances. The pattern was consistent and chilling. Scientists who achieved success with frequency therapy would suddenly suffer mysterious accidents or unexplained illnesses, often just before they were scheduled to present their findings or testify about the effectiveness of the technology. The technology that could have saved millions of lives was systematically erased to protect the profits of an industry that benefited from treating disease rather than curing it. Today, Rife's frequency therapy remains suppressed, mentioned only in whispered conversations among alternative medicine practitioners who understand the true history of this remarkable discovery. The Brown anti-gravity device. While experimenting with electrically charged capacitors, Brown observed something extraordinary. When high voltage was applied to these devices, they experienced a net force that seemed to defy gravity. The capacitors would move toward their positive electrode, creating thrust without any propellant, moving parts, or reaction mass of any kind. This phenomenon, which became known as the Biefeld-Brown effect, suggested that electricity and gravity were connected in ways that contradicted Einstein's general relativity. Brown had apparently discovered that electrical fields could directly influence gravitational fields, opening up possibilities that mainstream physics insisted were impossible. By 1952, Brown had refined his anti-gravity technology to the point where he could demonstrate controlled flight using electrical fields alone. In classified demonstrations for military officials, disc-shaped capacitors flew around circular courses under their own power, achieving speeds of several hundred miles per hour using only electrical energy. The implications of Brown's electrogravitics research were staggering. This technology could enable spacecraft that didn't require fuel, aircraft that could hover indefinitely using only battery power, and transportation systems that operated silently without environmental impact. The technology promised to revolutionize every aspect of human mobility and space exploration. Military interest in Brown's work was immediate and intense. Classified research projects with code names like Winter Haven and Project Y received substantial funding from the Air Force and Navy. Brown was recruited to develop military applications of anti-gravity technology, including disc-shaped aircraft that could outperform any conventional fighter plane. By 1955, Brown had developed electrogravitics devices that could lift their own power supplies and achieve sustained flight. Classified demonstrations showed disc-shaped craft powered by high-voltage generators, achieving remarkable performance characteristics that conventional aircraft couldn't match. Then suddenly, everything changed. In 1956, all research into electrogravitics was classified under national security orders that made public discussion of anti-gravity technology illegal. Brown's patents were seized, his research facilities were closed, and all documentation of the technology was removed from public access. The official explanation was that the research had failed to produce practical results. But independent investigators discovered that major aerospace companies had secretly incorporated electrogravitics research into advanced aircraft programs. Aviation Week magazine reported that several manufacturers were developing flameless jet engines and electrogravitic propulsion systems for next-generation military aircraft. Brown died in 1985, still prohibited from discussing his breakthrough discovery that electricity could overcome gravity. His anti-gravity technology remains classified, hidden within government laboratories where it may have contributed to advanced aircraft programs that officially don't exist. Real quick, if you're learning something new from this video, be sure to like and drop a comment with your favorite. It helps us to spread this info to those who need to hear it. Also, subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss the next one. Trust me, there's a lot more. Now back to it. The Keeley motor mystery. In 1872, inventor John Ernst Worrell, Keeley developed what he called a sympathetic vibrational motor that appeared to extract unlimited energy from acoustic frequencies. Keeley claimed his device could harness what he termed etheric force, the vibrational energy that existed within all matter. Public demonstrations in Philadelphia showed Keeley's motor performing feats that seemed to violate the laws of thermodynamics. The device lifted enormous weights, powered industrial equipment, and ran continuously for hours, using only sound waves generated by tuning forks and acoustic resonators. Scientists and investors who witnessed these demonstrations confirmed that Keeley's machine produced far more energy than any known power source could provide. The device generated thousands of horsepower using only vibrations that Keeley created with simple musical instruments. The Keeley Motor Company was formed in 1874 with funding from wealthy investors who recognized the revolutionary implications of unlimited free energy. But as development progressed, these same investors realized that Keeley's technology would make existing industrial infrastructure obsolete, destroying fortunes built on coal, steam, and mechanical power. Systematic sabotage of Keeley's work began when investors demanded that he reveal the complete principles behind his vibrational energy source. When Keeley refused to disclose his methods, funding was withdrawn and legal action was taken to seize his equipment and research materials. After Keeley's death in 1898, investigators claimed to find evidence of fraud in his laboratory, including hidden compressed air systems that allegedly powered his demonstrations. However, these debunking efforts were funded by the same investors who had withdrawn support from his research and had financial interest in suppressing the technology. Modern analysis suggests that Keeley may have discovered legitimate principles of energy extraction from molecular vibration that wouldn't be understood by mainstream science until the development of quantum mechanics decades later. His etheric force appears to describe what we now call zero-point energy extraction through harmonic manipulation. The Hutchison effect. John Hutchison was attempting to recreate some of Nikola Tesla's high-voltage experiments when he made an accidental discovery that would change his life forever. While operating multiple electromagnetic generators simultaneously in his laboratory, Hutchison noticed that objects in certain areas began exhibiting impossible behavior. Metal bars would bend like rubber. Pieces of aluminum would spontaneously levitate, floating in mid-air with no visible means of support. Most remarkably, dissimilar materials would fuse together at the molecular level without heat or pressure, creating impossible alloys that shouldn't exist according to conventional metallurgy. The Hutchison effect, as this phenomenon became known, occurred when multiple electromagnetic fields intersected to create zones where normal physics ceased to function. Objects placed in these electromagnetic field zones exhibited behavior that violated conservation of energy, mass, and momentum. Military officials from both the United States and Canadian governments observed Hutchison's demonstrations and confirmed that the effects were genuine. Colonel John Alexander from the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command witnessed materials levitating and transmuting, reporting that the phenomena couldn't be explained by any known scientific principles. What made the Hutchison effect particularly disturbing was its ability to alter matter at the atomic level. Steel would partially transmute into aluminum. Wood would fuse with metal. Objects would spontaneously change their molecular composition in ways that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of chemistry and nuclear physics. In 1990, Hutchison's laboratory equipment was confiscated by Canadian authorities acting on behalf of international military interests. His electromagnetic generators, documentation, and experimental materials were seized and classified under national security orders that prohibited him from discussing or replicating his work. The suppression of Hutchison's discoveries appears motivated by their revolutionary implications for matter manipulation. If electromagnetic fields could cause levitation, transmutation, and defiance of physical laws, the technology could revolutionize manufacturing, transportation, and material science, while making conventional military hardware completely obsolete. The Reich Orgone. Wilhelm Reich discovered what he termed orgone energy while studying the relationship between psychological health and biological vitality. Reich observed that living organisms naturally accumulated and radiated a form of energy that could be concentrated using alternating layers of organic and metallic materials arranged in specific geometric patterns. Reich's orgone accumulator consisted of a box-like structure with walls made from alternating layers of steel wool and organic materials like cotton or wood chips. This configuration created what Reich called an orgone field that could be used to treat illness, accelerate healing, and restore biological vitality to living organisms. Medical testing showed remarkable results. Patients treated in orgone accumulators experienced significant improvements in conditions including cancer, arthritis, and chronic fatigue. Temperature measurements confirmed that the devices generated measurable heat without any external power source, suggesting they were actually concentrating environmental energy. Reich's experiments extended beyond healing applications. He developed large-scale orgone devices called cloudbusters that could disperse clouds, create rainfall, and control atmospheric conditions by manipulating orgone energy flows in the atmosphere. Documented demonstrations showed successful weather control over large geographical areas using only mechanical orgone manipulation devices. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration began investigating Reich's work in 1947, claiming that orgone energy didn't exist and that his medical claims were fraudulent. Despite extensive documentation and witness testimony supporting Reich's discoveries, federal authorities obtained court injunctions prohibiting the distribution of orgone devices. In 1956, federal agents raided Reich's laboratory and destroyed his research materials. The systematic destruction was so thorough that agents burned Reich's scientific journals and personal correspondence, eliminating decades of research into bioenergy effects. Reich was imprisoned in 1957 on charges of contempt of court for continuing his orgone research in violation of federal injunctions. He died in federal prison 8 months later under circumstances that his supporters considered suspicious, effectively ending all legitimate research into orgone energy phenomena. The suppression of Reich's orgone technology appears motivated by its implications for medical treatment and energy generation. If orgone accumulators could treat diseases and concentrate environmental energy, they threatened pharmaceutical profits and conventional power generation industries. The Coral Castle magnetic levitator mystery. Between 1923 and 1951, Edward Leeds Calnan built Coral Castle using massive coral blocks weighing up to 30 tons each. Working alone at night with only primitive tools, Leeds Calnan demonstrated an unknown method of moving enormous stone blocks that appeared to involve magnetic levitation technology. Leeds Calnan claimed to understand the secrets of pyramid construction and anti-gravity, stating that he had discovered how ancient Egyptians moved massive stone blocks using magnetic forces rather than mechanical advantage. He built his Coral Castle as a demonstration of these lost construction techniques. Witnesses occasionally observed Leeds Calnan working at night and reported seeing him moving massive coral blocks as if they weighed nothing. The blocks would reportedly float through the air and position themselves precisely where Leeds Calnan directed them, suggesting some form of magnetic or gravitational manipulation. The engineering required to move 30-ton blocks using conventional methods would require heavy machinery that Leeds Calnan didn't possess. His primitive tools, pulleys, chains, and hand-built tripods couldn't generate the forces needed to lift and position stones weighing tens of thousands of pounds with the precision shown at Coral Castle. Leeds Calnan's workshop contained unusual electrical equipment, including homemade generators, electromagnetic coils, and devices that he claimed could harness magnetic currents. He spoke frequently about understanding magnetic current and the relationship between magnetism and gravity that mainstream science ignored. After Leeds Calnan's death in 1951, government investigators immediately sealed his workshop and confiscated all of his equipment and research notes. The devices he used for stone construction were removed and classified, and all documentation of his magnetic levitation methods was eliminated from public access. Analysis of the coral blocks reveals cut marks and shaping that couldn't have been achieved with primitive hand tools. The precision of the stone cutting and the complexity of the mechanical joints suggest the use of advanced tools that Leeds Calnan officially didn't possess. Modern attempts to move similar coral blocks using conventional construction equipment have required multiple cranes and teams of workers. The fact that Leeds Calnan accomplished the same work alone using primitive tools suggests he had access to construction principles that remain unknown to conventional engineering. The Searle effect generator. In the 1960s, John Searle created what he called the Searle effect generator, consisting of magnetic rollers that orbited around magnetized rings in specific geometric patterns. As the rollers moved around the rings, they generated electrical current through magnetic induction while simultaneously creating anti-gravity effects that reduced the device's apparent weight to zero. Demonstrations showed Searle effect generator devices producing kilowatts of electrical power without any input energy source while simultaneously levitating and flying through the air under their own power. The generators appeared to extract unlimited energy from magnetic field interactions that somehow didn't violate conservation of energy laws. Witnesses described seeing Searle's generators floating above their mounting platforms while powering electrical loads that should have required substantial input power. The devices generated electricity continuously without fuel, mechanical input, or any apparent energy source other than the magnetic interactions of their rotating components. The technology combined free energy generation with anti-gravity propulsion in a single device that could theoretically power spacecraft indefinitely while providing their own lift and propulsion. The implications for space travel and energy generation were revolutionary, offering unlimited power and transportation capabilities. In 1968, British authorities raided Searle's laboratory and confiscated his equipment, claiming that his generators were creating electrical interference with aircraft navigation systems. All devices were destroyed, and Searle was prohibited from continuing his research under threat of imprisonment for violating electronic emissions regulations. Searle spent several years in prison on charges related to electrical code violations and generator operation without proper permits. During his incarceration, all of his research materials were confiscated and destroyed. The Schauberger's implosion engine. Victor Schauberger developed engines that created vortex effects in air and water, concentrating energy inward rather than dispersing it outward like conventional explosion engines. The vortex implosion process generated tremendous power while actually cooling the engine and producing pure, energized air and water as byproducts. Schauberger's implosion engines achieved remarkable performance characteristics, generating substantial horsepower while consuming minimal fuel and producing no harmful emissions. The engines operated almost silently and became more efficient as they ran longer, apparently extracting additional energy from the vortex implosion process itself. German military forces took interest in Schauberger's technology during World War II, commissioning him to develop implosion engines for advanced aircraft applications. His work contributed to disc-shaped aircraft prototypes that achieved flight characteristics impossible with conventional propulsion systems. After the war ended, American intelligence forces captured Schauberger and seized all of his research materials, including prototypes, blueprints, and documentation of implosion engine principles. He was interrogated extensively about his vortex technology before being released with warnings never to continue his research. Schauberger's implosion engines demonstrated energy efficiency levels that violated conventional thermodynamic principles. The devices appeared to extract more energy from fuel than combustion chemistry should allow, suggesting they were tapping into additional energy sources through vortex manipulation of air and water molecules. In 1958, American businessmen convinced Schauberger to come to the United States to develop his implosion technology for commercial applications. However, after arriving, he was forced to sign contracts that gave complete control of his inventions to American corporations while prohibiting him from continuing independent research. Schauberger died in 1958 shortly after returning to Austria, reportedly broken by the suppression of his life's work. All of his implosion engine technology was classified and removed from public access, preventing the development of clean energy systems that could have eliminated environmental pollution from power generation. The Philadelphia teleporter. In 1943, according to witness testimony, the U.S. Navy conducted a classified experiment that teleported the destroyer USS Eldridge from Philadelphia to Norfolk using experimental electromagnetic field generators. The Philadelphia experiment, as it became known, allegedly demonstrated matter transmission and invisibility technology that was immediately classified. The experiment was reportedly based on Einstein's unified field theory, which suggested that electromagnetic and gravitational fields could be manipulated to alter space-time around physical objects. By generating powerful electromagnetic fields around the ship, researchers hoped to achieve radar invisibility, but instead achieved something far more extraordinary. According to witness accounts, massive electromagnetic generators created a field around USS Eldridge that caused the ship to vanish completely from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The ship allegedly reappeared minutes later at Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia, over 200 miles away, having apparently traveled instantaneously through what could only be described as teleportation. The crew of USS Eldridge allegedly experienced severe psychological and physical effects from the teleportation process. Some sailors were reportedly found fused partially into the ship's metal structure. Others became invisible and couldn't turn the effect off. Many suffered from temporal displacement that left them existing partially outside normal time flow. The Navy immediately classified all records of the alleged experiment and denied that any such research had occurred. Witnesses were transferred to different assignments, sworn to secrecy, and threatened with court-martial if they discussed what they had observed. If true, the teleportation technology would have demonstrated that physical matter could be transmitted instantaneously across vast distances using electromagnetic field manipulation. The implications for transportation, communication, and military applications would have been revolutionary, offering capabilities that could fundamentally transform human civilization. Independent researchers who investigated the Philadelphia experiment found evidence that the technology may have been based on principles of dimensional manipulation that allowed objects to travel through parallel space-time dimensions, rather than conventional three-dimensional space. The systematic suppression of alleged teleportation technology appears motivated by its implications for military and economic control. If matter transmission became available, it would eliminate transportation industries, make military bases vulnerable to instant attack, and fundamentally alter the structure of global commerce and political power. These 10 impossible inventions reveal a disturbing pattern that spans more than a century. Revolutionary technologies that could have transformed human civilization have been systematically suppressed, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. What unites these suppressed inventions isn't scientific impossibility, but economic and political threat. Free energy would eliminate utility companies, cancer cures would destroy pharmaceutical profits. Anti-gravity would revolutionize transportation and make military aircraft obsolete. Matter manipulation would eliminate scarcity-based economics. Each technology was suppressed because it challenged industries worth trillions of dollars. The pattern of suppression is consistent across decades and continents. Brilliant inventors create revolutionary technologies, demonstrate their effectiveness to credible witnesses, then face systematic persecution through patent seizure, equipment confiscation, legal harassment, and often mysterious deaths or disappearances. The innovations that could have created a golden age of human prosperity lie buried in classified vaults or destroyed entirely. Perhaps most disturbing is what these erased inventions reveal about the nature of technological progress. Innovation isn't limited by scientific possibility, but by economic permission. Breakthrough technologies exist, but remain hidden because they threaten the profit margins of industries built on artificial scarcity and planned obsolescence. The inventions we've examined represent just a fraction of the revolutionary technologies that have been systematically erased from history. In classified facilities worldwide, Breakthrough innovations gather dust, while humanity continues to struggle with problems that were solved decades ago by inventors whose work was deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. Consider the broader implications of what we've discovered. Every one of these technologies shared common characteristics that made them targets for suppression. They offered solutions that would democratize power, eliminate artificial scarcity, and remove the control mechanisms that certain industries use to maintain their dominance over human society. Tesla's wireless energy system would have made electricity freely available to everyone on Earth. No more monthly power bills, no more dependence on fossil fuels for electrical generation, no more centralized control over humanity's most basic energy needs. The technology existed, it worked, but it was destroyed because free energy cannot be metered, controlled, or monetized. Rife's frequency therapy represented something equally threatening to established interests. Cancer treatment generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually for pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and medical equipment manufacturers. A simple, inexpensive cure that could be operated by any technician would have eliminated this entire revenue stream overnight. The cure existed, it was proven effective in clinical trials, but it was suppressed to protect an industry built on treating symptoms rather than eliminating causes. Brown's anti-gravity technology could have revolutionized transportation decades before we developed modern aircraft. Imagine flying cars powered by nothing more than electrical batteries, spacecraft that didn't require massive fuel tanks, or freight transport that could move goods instantly across any distance. The implications for military applications alone would have shifted the global balance of power. That's precisely why it was classified and hidden from public development. The pattern becomes clear when you examine each case individually, but it becomes undeniable when you see them all together. These weren't isolated incidents of scientific failure or fraudulent claims. They were coordinated efforts to suppress technologies that would fundamentally alter the economic and political structures that govern our world. What's particularly disturbing is how this suppression continues today. Modern inventors who develop breakthrough energy technologies face the same systematic persecution that destroyed Tesla's career a century ago. Patent applications are immediately classified under secrecy orders. Research funding disappears. Laboratories are raided. Equipment is confiscated. The inventors themselves face legal harassment, financial ruin, and sometimes worse. The Inventions Secrecy Act allows the government to classify any patent that might threaten national security or economic stability. Over 5,000 patents currently remain under these secrecy orders. Many involve energy generation, propulsion systems, and healing technologies that could transform human civilization. But instead of benefiting humanity, they remain locked away in classified vaults. This reveals something profound about the nature of technological progress in our modern world. We're taught to believe that innovation happens naturally, that better technologies inevitably replace inferior ones, and that human ingenuity will always find a way to solve our greatest challenges. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens within economic and political systems that determine which technologies are allowed to succeed and which are suppressed. The technologies that reach the marketplace aren't necessarily the best ones. They're the ones that serve the interests of existing power structures. Think about the energy crisis that has dominated political discourse for decades. We're told that humanity desperately needs new forms of clean, renewable energy to replace fossil fuels and prevent environmental catastrophe. Yet the evidence suggests that such technologies have existed for over a century. They were suppressed not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. The same pattern applies to medical technologies. We're told that diseases like cancer require massive research investments and expensive treatments because they're inherently difficult to cure. Yet the evidence suggests that effective treatments were discovered decades ago and suppressed to protect pharmaceutical profits. Transportation technologies follow the same pattern. We're told that flying cars and advanced propulsion systems remain in the realm of science fiction because the engineering challenges are too complex. Yet the evidence suggests that anti-gravity and advanced propulsion technologies were achieved in the 1950s and classified for military applications. The world we inhabit isn't the world we could have. It's the world that certain interests have decided we're allowed to have. The technologies that could eliminate poverty, cure diseases, provide unlimited clean energy, and transport us to the stars exist. They've been locked away to preserve an existing order that benefits from human limitation and dependence. This understanding changes everything about how we view technological progress and human potential. We're not limited by the laws of physics or the constraints of scientific possibility. We're limited by economic systems that profit from scarcity and political structures that maintain control through technological restriction. The inventors whose stories we've examined were heroes who dared to challenge these limitations. They saw beyond the artificial constraints imposed by existing industries and developed technologies that could genuinely improve the human condition. For their efforts, they were persecuted, impoverished, imprisoned, and in some cases, killed. Their sacrifice wasn't in vain if we learn from their example. The technologies they developed continue to exist, even if they remain hidden. The principles they discovered continue to operate, even if mainstream science refuses to acknowledge them. The potential they glimpsed continues to await realization, even if powerful interests work to prevent it. But perhaps the most important lesson from these 10 impossible inventions isn't about the technologies themselves. It's about the courage required to challenge systems that benefit from human suffering and limitation. Each of these inventors could have chosen safer paths. They could have developed incremental improvements to existing technologies. They could have worked within established systems and accepted conventional limitations. Instead, they dared to imagine something better. They refused to accept that humanity had to remain dependent on scarce resources, expensive treatments, and limited transportation. They believed that technology should serve human freedom rather than corporate profits. They were willing to risk everything to prove that a better world was possible. Their example reminds us that the greatest innovations don't come from following established paths. They come from questioning fundamental assumptions, challenging existing limitations, and having the courage to pursue revolutionary ideas even when powerful forces oppose them. The 10 inventions we've explored prove that revolutionary technologies aren't limited by scientific possibility. They're limited by economic permission. The same principles that guided Tesla's wireless energy transmission, Rife's frequency therapy, and Brown's anti-gravity research continue to operate today. The question isn't whether these technologies can work. The question is whether we'll have the courage to develop them despite the forces that oppose human advancement. The greatest tragedy of these suppressed inventions isn't that they were lost. It's that they were deliberately hidden, ensuring that human potential remains artificially constrained, while revolutionary solutions to our greatest challenges remain forever just out of reach. But their story doesn't end with suppression. It ends with the possibility that future generations will rediscover these technologies and finally realize the vision of human advancement that their inventors died trying to achieve. The impossible has already been accomplished. It's been hidden, suppressed, and erased from official history. But the evidence remains for those brave enough to seek it. The technologies exist for those bold enough to develop them. The future that these inventors envisioned awaits those courageous enough to claim it. Understanding the true scope of technological suppression requires examining not just what was hidden, but why these particular innovations pose such existential threats to established power structures. The pattern becomes even more disturbing when you realize that many of these technologies weren't just theoretically possible, but were actively being researched and developed by major corporations and government agencies before being suddenly classified and removed from public knowledge. What's particularly revealing is how the suppression methods evolved over time. In Tesla's era, the approach was relatively straightforward. Financial backing was withdrawn, facilities were destroyed, and research materials were confiscated. But as the 20th century progressed and more inventors began achieving breakthrough results, the suppression became more sophisticated and systematic. By the 1940s and 1950s, entire bureaucratic frameworks were established to identify and contain revolutionary technologies before they could threaten existing industries. The Inventions Secrecy Act wasn't created in response to national security concerns during World War II. It was designed to prevent technologies like those we've examined from reaching public development. Consider how different our world would be if just one of these technologies had been allowed to develop naturally. If Tesla's wireless energy transmission had been commercialized in the early 1900s, the entire Industrial Revolution would have taken a different path. Cities wouldn't have needed to be built around centralized power plants. Rural areas would have had the same access to electricity as urban centers. The environmental devastation caused by coal mining and oil drilling could have been avoided entirely. The social implications would have been equally profound. Energy independence would have eliminated one of the primary sources of geopolitical conflict. Nations wouldn't fight wars over oil reserves if unlimited clean energy was freely available to everyone. The economic disparities between energy-rich and energy-poor regions would never have developed. But perhaps most significantly, free energy would have accelerated technological development across every other field. Manufacturing costs would have plummeted. Transportation would have become virtually free. Scientific research would have proceeded without the constraint of energy costs. Humanity might have achieved space colonization, eliminated material scarcity, and solved problems that we still struggle with today. The same accelerated development would have occurred if Rife's frequency therapy had been allowed to flourish. Medical science would have taken an entirely different direction, focusing on understanding the vibrational properties of living organisms rather than developing expensive pharmaceutical interventions. Preventive medicine would have advanced decades earlier. The massive healthcare bureaucracies that consume such enormous resources today might never have developed. Anti-gravity technology would have revolutionized not just transportation, but our entire relationship with the physical environment. Architecture would have developed along completely different lines if buildings didn't need to support their own weight against gravity. Manufacturing would have been transformed if heavy materials could be manipulated as easily as light ones. Space exploration would have begun decades earlier and proceeded much more rapidly. What becomes clear when you examine these suppressed technologies together is that they represent more than just individual innovations. They represent an entirely different paradigm of human development, a paradigm based on abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition, and technological solutions that serve humanity rather than corporate profits. The inventors who developed these technologies weren't just creating new devices. They were demonstrating that the fundamental assumptions underlying our economic and social systems were false. They proved that scarcity was artificially maintained, that technological limitations were deliberately imposed and that human potential was being systematically constrained. This explains why the suppression was so thorough and so consistent. These technologies didn't just threaten specific industries, they threatened the entire structure of power and control that those industries represented. They offered a vision of human civilization that was fundamentally incompatible with systems based on artificial limitation and manufactured dependence. The next time you flip a light switch, remember that you're using technology that could have been obsolete over a century ago. The next time you fill up your gas tank, consider that you might never have needed to if these suppressed innovations had been allowed to flourish. The next time you hear about breakthrough medical treatments that cost thousands of dollars, think about the simple frequency devices that could have made such expenses unnecessary. These 10 impossible inventions prove that the world we inhabit today isn't the result of natural technological evolution. It's the product of deliberate choices made by powerful interests who prioritize profit over human advancement. The technologies that could have eliminated energy scarcity, revolutionized medicine, and transformed transportation were systematically erased because they threatened existing power structures. But their legacy lives on in the evidence they left behind and in the courage of the inventors who dared to imagine a better world. Their sacrifice reminds us that true innovation requires more than scientific knowledge. It requires the willingness to challenge systems that benefit from human limitation and the determination to pursue revolutionary ideas, despite overwhelming opposition. The question now isn't whether these technologies existed. The evidence speaks for itself. The question is whether future generations will have the wisdom to rediscover them and the courage to ensure they're never suppressed again. The impossible has already been achieved. It's waiting for us to reclaim it. If you like the stories you've heard from this video, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories we uncover.